Tell me, what would you do if someone's pain made you smile? Would you tell anyone, or would you keep it as your little secret?
Sadism, a word that can spark both fascination and fear. When you hear it, maybe you think of tyrants from history, villains from movies, or even anime characters. But the truth is far more complex. Sadism is not just one single thing. It has multiple faces, and some of them might surprise you. Today, I'll show you the three main types of sadism, their differences, real and fictional examples, and at the end, I'll explain why the last one might not be as dark as you think.
And maybe I'll tell you how to try it yourself, if you're not too scared, my little darklings.
In today's video, we're going to talk about the three main types of sadism. We'll start with physical, then move to psychological, and finally end with sexual.
I can't wait for the last one.
Yeah, I figured. But let's start with the physical type. Physical sadism is when someone takes pleasure in another person's suffering. When they're in pain, injured, or sick, sadism covers a very wide spectrum, so just because someone says they're a sadist, doesn't mean they're going to pull out a knife on you.
But I always carry a knife with me.
Elizabeth, that's not something you should brag about.
But you're the one who told me to carry it for safety.
True. But you don't have to tell everyone. Alright, moving on. The most common type is actually sexual sadism, which we'll get to at the end of the video. For now, let's focus on the physical kind. We've got two perfect examples. First, Esdeath from Akame ga Kill. She displayed sadism in all aspects of her life. It was ingrained in her from the village where she grew up, learning the philosophy, the strong rule, the weak die.
Not too far from the truth, honestly.
True, but here's the important part. Even sadists can genuinely love. They're not always purely evil. Yes, to her prisoners and subordinates she was ruthless, using them as toys, torturing them, hurting them with blades, doing whatever it took to extract information. Even with Tatsumi, she showed a sadistic side. But it's complicated. People raised with the belief that only the strong survive often think that if they've survived, they're superior, and when they fall in love, they see that person as someone worth protecting, even if it's in a twisted way. So, while they might enjoy humiliating them, making them submit in humiliating ways, they still love them.
I have nothing against foot kissing, personally.
If anyone knows how to make sure your yandere doesn't share all your private life details on the internet, please leave a comment, we'd appreciate it. Alright, moving on to Joffrey Baratheon from Game of Thrones. I'd say he's possibly the most famous sadist of all time, and he's very different from Esdeath. Joffrey enjoyed torture and murder, but unlike Esdeath, he didn't earn his power, he inherited it. And here's the scary part. A lot of people wouldn't be able to handle suddenly having the power to do anything they wanted. Many would end up just like him. It's the same as lottery winners. They suddenly get all that money, and most spend it recklessly. Joffrey got his power, and used it without a second thought. Alright, let's move on to the next type, psychological sadism. This one is terrifying, because these sadists are easily 1,000 times more dangerous. Sure, hitting someone might feel satisfying, but in today's world you have to be smart about it, otherwise you'll end up in prison. That's how physical sadism works. But psychological sadism, it has almost no limits, and that's what makes it dangerous. Humiliating people in public isn't illegal. Breaking someone mentally, to the point they don't want to keep living, isn't technically against the law if you're clever. And here's the part that's truly horrifying. Physical wounds heal, but the mind stays broken forever.
So, you're a psychological sadist then?
No. If anything, I'm a sexual sadist, but not a psychological one. I use manipulation for purpose and gain, not for pure pleasure. So, let's start with the first example. Johan Liebert, a perfect embodiment of nihilism and a true monster. This is a man who murdered his adoptive parents, who convinced people to slaughter each other, and watched with a smile. Johan's childhood was pure misfortune. He was taken to the Red Rose experiment, where children were taught manipulation and dehumanization. Later, he made even children kill each other, smiling as it happened. Then he was placed in the infamous orphanage, Kinderheim 511. And again, he manipulated everyone inside to kill each other. Staff, children. No one survived, and his goal reunite with his sister.
That's almost romantic in a twisted way.
Illy, no incest talk today. Johan's ultimate goal: the annihilation of all life on Earth. Scary, and he's not afraid to harm children. In fact, he enjoys it, thinking it serves his goal. One of his most disturbing acts was trying to turn a boy named Diego into someone just like him. A total nihilist. It's incredible that Diego managed to keep living and stay optimistic. Johan also had a terrifying talent for conversation, making people decide their life was no longer worth continuing. And here's the truly chilling part. People like this really exist. The kind of person you could sit down with for coffee and leave convinced there's no point in going on. Now, let's move to Hannibal Lecter. A name almost everyone has heard. He appears like a gentleman, but at home he prepares a human brain for dinner instead of pork. As a child, Hannibal experienced trauma on another level. His parents died in a bombing, but what happened next was 100 times worse. He and his sister were taken prisoner, and when their captors ran out of food, was forced to witness cannibalism involving his sister.
I hate to admit it, but even I find that disgusting, and I could defend murderers.
Exactly. It's horrifying. Think about it. What would you do if you saw your little sibling being eaten in front of you? Would you survive? Or would you become a monster like him? Who knows? Hannibal later lived with his aunt, the only person he truly liked. He wasn't a psychopath who killed purely for pleasure. He enjoyed revenge. One of the first things he did was track down the men who killed his sister, and he murdered them. And yes, he ate them. His acts were monstrous, no one's denying that. But I want you to really think, what would happen to you in that situation? Would you become a monster, or wouldn't you survive at all? Let me know in the comments. Alright, we finally made it to sexual sadism. I'm sure this is the part many of you were waiting for.
Yay! I can't wait.
Sexual sadism is complicated. It's not always bad, literally. If two people in a relationship mutually agree on rules and boundaries, then sadism can be practiced freely. And as a bonus, if you find a masochist as your partner, that changes everything.
That's me.
Yes, that's you. And don't interrupt me. So if you find a masochist, it doesn't have to be harmful for the other person. And even though the world tries to paint sadists and masochists as a tiny, evil minority, that's just not true. There are far more of us than you think. So, here's my advice. Find a partner who will accept your sadistic desires. Because if you try to hide it or suppress it, it will end badly. Very badly. Let's look at 2 examples. First, Keyaru from Rito of Healer, one of the most controversial characters ever. He was tortured and abused, and then he turned back time to take revenge on everyone who wronged him. Keyaru is a clear example of unhealthy sexual sadism, because sometimes he didn't care if the other person consented. Still, he's a useful case for understanding the dark side of these urges. Now let's move to the most famous example. Christian Grey from 50 Shades of Grey. Christian was neglected and abused as a child, which made him crave structure and control. He's a perfect example of how dominant-submissive relationships can work healthily, something I plan to talk about a lot more on this channel. Christian didn't want to harm without thought. He wanted dominance, yes, but he also wanted connection. He found an alternative way to fulfill his fantasies without causing unnecessary damage. The first thing he did was propose a contract to make sure Anastasia agreed. This is the perfect example of a consensual dominant-submissive relationship. Yes, sometimes he used manipulation and pressure, but that happens even in the best relationships.
Exactly. Just like ours. And don't worry, you'll never get rid of me.
I know. That's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And if there's a topic you'd like me to cover, leave it in the comments. Bye-bye.
Bye, my darklings. Shadow, don't you want to move from theory to practice?
What did I tell you about talking about our private life on the internet?